Today, we are diving deep into a forgotten chapter of American history. We're going to talk about the nation's very first Constitution and the absolutely brilliant, complicated, and, deeply contradictory man who wrote it.
It sounds like a riddle, right? I mean, how could one of the most influential patriots of the Revolution, a guy who basically gave voice to the entire colonial cause, turn around and refuse to take that final, huge step towards independence? The answer lies with one of the most fascinating and honestly overlooked of the Founding Fathers.
Meet John Dickinson. Now, you know the names Adams, Jefferson, Franklin, but Dickinson's words, you could argue they did just as much as anyone's to lay the intellectual groundwork for the Revolution. And his whole story is just built on this incredible paradox. So how in the world did he earn a nickname like Penman of the Revolution? Well, it all came down to the absolute, undeniable power of his writing. Okay, picture this. It's 1767. A series of essays called Letters from a Farmer in Pennsylvania starts getting published, and they just spread like wildfire. We're talking nearly every colonial newspaper. In them, Dickinson laid out this crystal-clear, forceful argument. Parliament could regulate trade, sure, but it had no right to tax the colonies just to raise money. He basically took all that simmering anger the colonists felt and turned it into a coherent political philosophy. Dickinson saw the writing on the wall. He knew the colonies' greatest strength was their unity, and he warned them that Britain's whole strategy was to pick them apart one by one. His letters were this powerful, urgent call for solidarity against that divide-and-conquer playbook. And listen, this wasn't just some dry academic writing. You can feel the passion, right? Rouse yourselves. He was a master of persuasion, getting the public to see the danger right in front of them. But all those powerful words, well, they were about to lead to a moment of crisis that he just wasn't ready for. So, for all his revolutionary words, when the moment of truth finally came, Dickinson's cautious side put him at odds with the more radical guys. And yet, his principles would go on to shape the very first government of the United States. Now, this is so important. This was not an act of cowardice. It wasn't about loyalty to the king. It was a principled stand. Dickinson genuinely believed that a break with Britain was premature. He thought the colonies needed a formal government and foreign allies before declaring independence. He even sent one last-ditch olive branch petition to the king. When it was rejected, he abstained from the vote, knowing full well it would probably destroy his reputation. But here's the amazing part. The second the declaration passed, the guy some were calling a traitor got right back to work. He threw himself into the most important job there was, creating a government for this brand new nation. He was the main author of the Articles of Confederation. And the government he designed, well, it perfectly reflected his deep-seated fear of unchecked power. It wasn't a powerful, centralized nation. It was a league of friendship. Think of it like this. Each state was basically its own independent country, just loosely allied for mutual defense. The central government, Congress, was kept weak on purpose. And right here, you can start to see the problems. Look, Congress could maintain an army, but it couldn't levy taxes to actually pay for it. It could make treaties with other countries, but it had no power to regulate the trade that resulted from them. And the biggest one? To change anything, any amendment, you needed a unanimous vote from all 13 states. This design, it had some serious, and as we're about to see, some fatal flaws. You know, the weaknesses that Dickinson and the others built into the Articles weren't just theoretical problems. They quickly became a real-world crisis during a time historians now call the critical period. The 1780s were, to put it mildly, a mess. The central government was totally broke. It couldn't pay its debts, it couldn't enforce treaties, and it couldn't solve squabbles between the states. Twice, they tried to give Congress the power to tax, and both times it failed because just one single state said no. The League of Friendship was completely falling apart at the seams. So in the end, the very things that were designed to protect the states from tyranny ended up making the nation totally ungovernable. Without the power to tax or regulate trade, and with that impossible requirement for a unanimous vote, the Articles of Confederation were pretty much doomed from the start. But the story of John Dickinson, it holds an even deeper contradiction. Because for all his beautiful words about liberty, for all his principled political stands, Dickinson's life was built on a foundation that completely contradicted the ideals he championed so eloquently. This is the central and deeply uncomfortable paradox of John Dickinson. The penman of the Revolution was born into a wealthy family whose fortune, like so many at the time, came directly from the brutal system of chattel slavery.
His words about freedom were written from a reality of bondage.
59. This number, it's believed to represent the number of men, women, and children that Dickinson may have enslaved on his Delaware plantation at one time. It's just a stark, sobering number that puts his philosophical arguments in a very, very different light.
And this isn't just distant history. Just recently, in 2021, archaeologists discovered what they believe are the unmarked graves of people enslaved on his plantation. They are a silent, powerful testament to the lives whose labor supported Dickinson's entire world, a world where he had the luxury to sit and contemplate the nature of liberty.
But, and this is a really important but, Dickinson's story doesn't end there. Unlike so many of his peers, he actually confronted this contradiction in his own life. Starting in 1777, he began the long, complicated process of freeing the people he enslaved. A decade later, he had completed it. That made him one of the only major founders to emancipate his enslaved workforce during his lifetime. It was a personal reckoning that truly set him apart.
And in the end, his reputation was restored. The man who refused to sign the Declaration, the man who created a flawed first government, was ultimately mourned by his political rival Thomas Jefferson as one of the truest patriots of the Revolution.
So that leaves us with this final question. John Dickinson was a man of deep principles and deep paradoxes, and his creation, the Articles of Confederation, was, let's face it, a failure. But maybe, like Dickinson himself, it was a necessary failure, a flawed, instructive first step that the nation had to take to learn what it truly needed to become. What do you think?